Today, we're going to look at a theory known as adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership is one of the more modern theories of leadership that I find quite interesting because it focuses on mobilizing workers to do the work. So the responsibility of the leader is to help the workers adapt to the situation that they're in to accomplish the work that they're supposed to. So let's look at some of the key points of adaptive leadership. First of all, we call it adaptive leadership because it focuses on the adaptations, the changes that the workers need to make in response to changing environments. When things change around them, workers need to change and to adjust, and it's the leader's responsibility to help them do that. So this model stresses the activities of the leader that will optimize the work of the followers. So the leaders are going to do stuff so that the work of the followers is the best it possibly can be, and this is done in light of the context in which the workers find themselves. So a definition of this adaptive leadership can be the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and to thrive. So the adaptive leaders help other people do the work, and they do it by mobilizing them, motivating them, organizing them, orienting them, giving them all that they need to solve the problems and do the work that they need to do, all the time while focusing the workers' attention on what's important. Now, from a Christian perspective, this is really interesting because it's real similar to a concept found in Ephesians 4, where the Apostle Paul is describing spiritual gifts, and he lists a bunch of leaders that are given to the church. And it says, God has given leaders to the church to prepare God's people for works of service so that the body of Christ might be built up. So the role of leaders in the church, pastors, apostles, missionaries, is not to do the work, but to prepare God's people for the work. And that's what adaptive leadership is about. It's not up to the leader and the manager to do the work, but to prepare his or her subordinates, the workers, to do the work. So it's all about equipping. So, when is adaptive leadership relevant? Because it's not always relevant. Sometimes you don't need adaptive leadership. Well, it depends on the type of situational challenges that the workers are facing. First of all, there's two different types of problems in this model. First are technical problems. And technical problems are problems that are clearly defined, and there's known solutions that begin implemented through existing organizational procedures. They're just kind of like routine problems. And this type of situation, you don't really need a whole lot of leadership. Somebody who's responsible, the worker, will know what to do, and the work will just need to go to do something. For example, there's some new software at an accounting firm isn't working. If there's an accountant who has the authority to address the problem, for example, contact the software company and have the program modified to meet the company's needs, this is what's known as a technical problem. The accountant has everything that he or she needs already to solve the problem. There's no leadership needed by the accountant's manager. So there's no need for an adaptive leadership in this just regular routine problem where the person who has a responsibility already knows what to do. A second type of challenge that people face are what's known as adaptive challenges. And these are problems that are not clearly defined or easy to identify and which don't have a clear solution. They're far more complex than the technical solutions. So, for example, suppose that a hospital wants to begin hospice care for terminally ill patients. They haven't been doing hospice care, but they want to start doing hospice care. This means that the patients and their families will face immense uncertainty about how and when the patients die. Because that's what hospice does. It takes care of somebody till they die. And so that means The staff, the patients, and the families are going to face lots of questions about the dying process, what the loss means, how to prepare with it, how to cope with it. And it's just going to be something really different than trying to make everybody well. So the challenges that the hospital will face and the managers in this hospital will face are not really clearly defined. What are they going to do with this new situation that they're implementing? Nor are the solutions easily found. So these type of challenges require adaptive leadership. Now, a characteristic of these type of challenges where the problem's not really clear and the solution's not clear is that they tend to be very value-laden, very personal, and they stir up people's emotions a lot. So they can get messy really quickly. So here we have the main picture illustrating the model of adaptive leadership. And we start off by looking at this column, situational challenges. We have to decide, is adaptive leadership necessary? If it's just a technical challenge, nope, no adaptive leadership's necessary. The person that has a responsibility, if they have the authority to solve the problem, they can go solve the problem. If it's just a technical challenge, it's not an issue. However, if it's an adaptive challenge, then that's when adaptive leadership is necessary. And similarly, we might see that there's both technical and adaptive challenges mixed together. This also calls for adaptive leadership. So what this model says, that when adaptive leadership is necessary, when there's adaptive challenges, there's 6 things that the leaders need to do, and that's what these 6 leader behaviors are what we'll discuss. And the outcome will be what's known as adaptive work. Work that's optimized for the challenge, and that'll be done in what's known as the holding environment, a safe environment. That's a key aspect of this model. So let's look at how this plays out. So there are 6 adaptive behaviors that a leader needs to perform in no specific order. They're not like steps or anything. They're things that should be going on pretty continually when there's a need for when a group or an organization needs to respond to adaptive challenges. The first phenomena, or the first leadership behavior is called get on the balcony. And that's the idea, is to pull oneself away from the details of the work and to get the big picture of everything that's involved in the situation. So the leader is responsible for getting the big picture of everything. Secondly, is to identify more specifically what type of adaptive challenges are in place. And this model presents not only a distinction between technical and adaptive challenges, but once you have an adaptive challenge, there's 4 common types of adaptive challenges that a leader needs to be on the lookout for. One is a gap between values and behaviors. When an organization says, "Oh yeah, this is what we value," but you look at what the behaviors are of the people in the organization, they don't match up. That's an adaptive challenge that a leader needs to address. A second type is competing commitments. Or competing goals that are kind of contradictory. Leaders have to address these. For example, there might be a commitment to raising quality, but there might also be a commitment to lowering cost. And it's possible that those 2 things are going to be working against each other, and an adaptive leader needs to make sure that this type of challenge is addressed. A third type of adaptive challenge are the elephants in the room. These are the things that everybody knows about, but nobody wants to mention because it's awkward. Maybe a worker is getting old and becoming less efficient. Maybe there's some relationship problems that nobody wants to address, but is causing the group to function less effectively. The adaptive leader needs to address these issues. Now, this can be quite challenging, especially if the elephant in the room concerns the leader. So this requires a lot of humility on the leader, a lot of openness, a lack of defensiveness, but a willingness to discuss everything without being defensive or attacking others. And then a fourth type of common adaptive challenge are people have this tendency to avoid work. They might prefer doing certain types of works, but there's other types of work that they avoid, and the adaptive leader needs to address this. A third type of behavior, and this is especially important in this model, is the idea of regulating distress. The leader needs to help others recognize the need for change, but not be overwhelmed by it. Because when there's this need to change, emotions often get high. It creates a stressful situation. So the leader must create what's known as a holding environment. And this is a safe atmosphere to discuss everything, even the elephants in the room. The follower and the leader have to have the freedom to address everything constructively without being penalized for asking questions, without being penalized for expressing one's doubts or fears, but a really safe environment that allows the problems to be addressed. Now, this is extremely difficult for leaders because a lot of times leaders have these visions, they have these projects, they have their goals, and if somebody questions them, especially one of their subordinates, they want to inflict pain on the subordinate, and that is not going to help the work get done. Leaders need to create safe environments, a holding environment where everything can be discussed. So the leader also needs to provide direction, protection, orientation, conflict management, describe productive norms, everything that's necessary to help people function successfully with a minimum of stress, not too little stress, because without any stress we don't work at all, but not too much stress. And the leader needs to regulate his or her own personal distress and stress levels by keeping in the productive range. Because if the leader gets too stressed and starts functioning in a dysfunctional way, that's not going to help anybody. A fourth behavior is to maintain disciplined attention. That means encouraging people to continually focus on the tough work that needs to be done, not the easy work that they like doing, not the technical problems that they've mastered already, but on the tough work that needs to be addressed. The fifth adaptive leadership behavior is known as give the work back to the people. So the manager has to avoid micromanaging. The manager gives the work to the people under his or her authority so that they do the work, not him or her. And the sixth adaptive leadership behavior is protect leadership voices from below. What does that mean? That means allowing people who are under the leader to have a voice, to express leadership ideas, to provide a contribution to solving the problems. And the leaders need to consider people who are at the fringe of the organization, who are marginalized, who are perhaps highly undesirable, who have weird problems, who have weird ideas. The leader needs to treat them with respect and dignity and take into consideration what they say, to value everybody and to maximize the contribution of what that person can make to the challenge that the group or organization is facing. So going back to the figure here, we've had the leader needs to look at the situational challenge, figure out if it's technical or adaptive. If it has an adaptive element to it, the leader needs to provide leadership behaviors. If it's a situational challenge, nope. And those are the 6 behaviors that we just went over. And the end product is what's known as adaptive work that's done in the holding environment. And that adaptive work is facilitated by the interaction between the leaders and the followers in the safe environment. So the goal of this is the adaptive work. That's what the adaptive leaders want to see what's happening. This is a smaller version of that model down there. Um, and the holding environment, the safe environment, is absolutely essential. And so the adaptive work grows out of the communication between the leaders and followers, but primarily the work is done by the followers. The leader creates the atmosphere, provides the tool necessary, provides the perspective necessary so that the subordinate can do the work. Now, this leadership model has lots of strengths. So, in contrast to the other leadership models, this adaptive leadership, it takes a process approach. Leadership's a complex transaction between leaders and followers, so it's going back and forth continually, the dialogue. And it's very follower-centered. The adaptive leaders mobilize people to engage in the adaptive work. So the output of this model is not what the leader does, it's what the follower does. And the leader needs to do everything possible so that his or her followers accomplish the maximum amount of work with the best quality. So another strength is it helps followers deal with conflicting values that emerge in changing work environments by having the leader help focus the issues. It's a very clear description of useful leadership behaviors. And it also introduces the concept of a holding environment, which we know from experience is really important. We need a safe environment to really thrive. So it introduces the idea of a holding environment as an important part of the leadership process. Now, the criticisms of this approach are actually pretty mild. The main criticism is that it's really tough to do empirical research on this because you have to measure interactions over time going back and forth. It doesn't really work too well to just do surveys to figure out how well this is working. These complex processes are difficult to test and measure, but that doesn't mean that they're true, and so it has this really good intuitive draw to it, and for this reason, it's become a very, very popular and useful approach to leadership.